All right, let's just jump straight into it. You can feel it, right? That tension in the air. The market's had this incredible run, but now it feels like we're at a total crossroads, and everyone's asking, okay, what's next? Yeah, that really is the million-dollar question. Is the bull run out of steam, or is it just getting started? Is this the end of the party, or are we just taking a little breather before the next massive leg up? Well, we're going to dive into a pretty fascinating analysis that suggests a huge turn could be right around the corner. So let's get into it. Why does everything feel so shaky? It all comes down to what traders call the wall of worry. And that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to climb that wall and deconstruct every single fear, every single brick that's holding people back right now. And here they are, the big ones. You hear them all the time, right? Oh, it's too late in the cycle. Valuations are in a total bubble. The Fed's never going to cut rates. And of course, inflation is just way too sticky. I mean, it's a pretty compelling story for being nervous, but does the actual data back it up? Okay, first up, let's tackle that feeling that it's too late. Look, the data just tells a totally different story. Take the ISM Manufacturing Index. It's been pretty weak for almost 3 years now. And historically, you just don't see market tops when the industrial economy is still in a slump like this. And then you've got housing. Remember 2008? A massive surplus of houses. Today, it's the exact opposite. We have a housing shortage. These are just not the signs of a bubble that's about to go pop. And what about history? Let's look at the historical data. If you find the 6 years in history that look the most like this one, a really strong run-up. Well, guess what? 5 out of those 6 years ended up positive. The only exception, 1936. Yeah, right after the Great Depression. A totally different world. So history seems to be screaming for a strong finish to the year. Okay, but what about the bubble fears? Everyone points to Nvidia, right? So let's actually look at its PE ratio. That's just a simple measure of how expensive it is. Nvidia's is sitting at 29. 29! You know what? That's actually cheaper than Costco or Walmart. It's not even in the same galaxy as Cisco back in 2000 when its PE was over 100, right at the peak of the dot-com bubble. The data just doesn't fit the bubble story, not even close. All right, next brick in the wall, inflation. The big fear is that it's just too stubborn, right? That the Fed is going to be forced to keep rates high forever. But when you actually look under the hood, the story completely changes. Get this. A whopping 75% of all the inflation we've seen recently came from just 3 things: housing, car insurance, and cars. That's it. This was never some broad, out-of-control problem. It was super, super concentrated. So obviously, the huge question is, what are those 3 things doing right now? Well, you guessed it. They're all reversing. And they're reversing fast. Used car prices, falling. Shelter costs, projected to drop. Car insurance, finally cooling off. It's kind of poetic, isn't it? The very things that created the inflation problem are now the things solving it. Okay, now I want you to switch gears with me for a second. We're going to pivot. Because this exact same theme, this big opportunity that's kind of hidden behind a wall of fear, it's playing out right now in a totally different world, the world of crypto. And specifically, we're going to decode a really fascinating and honestly a surprisingly predictable pattern with Ethereum. See, to really get Ethereum, you first have to understand how it dances with Bitcoin. Bitcoin is the leader, it always moves first. And what's interesting is that when Bitcoin starts a big rally, Ethereum often starts to bleed, but only relative to Bitcoin. This isn't a bad thing. It's just phase 1 of a very predictable 4-part cycle that we have seen play out over and over and over again. And this leads us to this great piece of slang that traders use. They call it going home. That's the term for that exact moment when Ethereum finally hits its absolute bottom against Bitcoin. But here's the kicker, the key insight. Going home isn't the end of the story. It's the beginning. It's the launch pad. It's where Ethereum's most insane, explosive uptrends have historically kicked off. And this right here is where our 2 stories, the stock market's wall of worry and this predictable crypto cycle, this is where they crash together. They actually converge and point to a very, very specific moment in time. Okay, prepare yourself, because the historical data on this is just wild. Look at this, 2016, 2017, 2018, and then again in 2020. When did Ethereum put in that major going home bottom against Bitcoin? December, 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 every single time. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. It is an unbelievably consistent seasonal pattern. So what does this all mean? Well, based on this ridiculously strong historical pattern, the analysis makes a really clear, super actionable prediction that this cycle is probably going to play out again. And that means Ethereum will find its major bottom, that going home moment, sometime in early December. Okay, so let's tie this all together. Let's zoom out. What have we actually got here? On one hand, you've got the stock market with this massive wall of worry that's built on fears that are, as we've seen, already starting to crumble. And on the other hand, you have the crypto market with this incredibly predictable cycle that's pointing to a very specific turning point. So let's recap the stock market case. The big fears? They just don't really hold up when you look at the data. History is pointing to a strong end of the year. And this is the big one, the main things driving inflation are now going in reverse. That could be the exact green light the Fed has been waiting for. And then you have the crypto case, which is just as compelling. Ethereum's doing its thing. It's going through that normal, predictable bleeding phase against Bitcoin. But we know how this story ends, right? Historically, this phase has consistently, time after time, resolved into a massive new uptrend that kicks off, you guessed it, in December. So this all brings us to one final, really exciting question. You've got inflation drivers reversing course. You have historical data pointing to a strong finish for stocks, and you have a crypto cycle that's timing a major bottom for a very specific month. Is December the month where it all finally clicks? Could this be the launchpad for the next massive market-wide rally? It really feels like the stage is set.